Hello, and Happy New Year to you if you decided to click on this video. 2023 is already looking like an exciting year for speedrunning, and what better way to start it off than to talk about the hottest game of the year, Amok Runner. This game has been super active on speedrun.com, and it's been blowing up on Twitch, which is mainly due to the love and passion for this amazing game from all the speedrunners involved. Oh, and there was also a $10,000 bounty for achieving the world record, but you know, minor details. One day Moist Critical, aka Charlie, was playing through some bad Steam games on his stream, but through his adventures, he discovered this diamond in the rough and decided to create a speedrunning competition out of it. And I am serious about how intense this competition has been for this game, because we've been seeing world-class speedrun talent from across the globe all giving it their best shot to see if they can prove they're the best and secure the bag. With this competition having a strict deadline of January 11th and starting on December 27th, that's only a little over 2 weeks to create a world record speedrun in a game nobody has ever speedrun before, with new routes and strategies being developed every day. Here are some of the speedrunners that entered this competition that I personally think will dominate the top of the leaderboards. But keep in mind, I wrote this list before the competition ended and may not be reflective of what the true outcome of the event is. But if I were to bet on one single person to win this competition, that person would be Ouija, the current world record holder for both 120 and 70 star categories of Super Mario 64.
I'll mute my desktop audio for this intro to the game so you guys don't have to hear it.
While Cheese and Simply were also both participating in this competition, and I would never rule them out for being top contenders, Ouija stood out to me not only because he has world records in two of the most contentious categories in speedrunning, but he excels at learning and implementing new and difficult techniques quickly. He has tons of speedrun experience across several games, and he's also a massive grinder, with the ability to stream tens of hours straight if he feels like he needs to. I can tell you firsthand that having tons of speedrun experience across a bunch of games is a massive advantage in a competition like this, but especially in Ouija's case, where he's pretty much been a top player in any game he's actively competed in. But for all the same reasons I'd bet on Ouija, I'd probably have to make my second pick Distortion 2.
You found this, Skip? Well, I was the first person to experiment with the cock, but I was not the one who figured it out. I was the one who brought people onto the cock, though.
Distortion is an OG speedrunner that has been speedrunning since 2014, with his main focus being towards the Dark Souls and Resident Evil series, but is known to dabble in other games like Getting Over It, and most recently CHOO-CHOO Charles. Distortion isn't a top runner in the sense that he holds tons of world records across a series of the games he runs, but that he picks up new speed games, usually on release, and will achieve and maintain world records and top times until he decides to move on to another project. In my opinion, Distortion excels in theory crafting and routing. Usually he's able to come up with new routes for his speed games and implement them extremely quickly while maintaining long 8+ hour streams. It's often that when I watch him, he's so far ahead of the rest of the community in terms of speed, your best bet is just watching his stream in order to keep up. Also, the games he's speedrunning are usually some of the most difficult games out there, yet he's able to learn and adapt at a very fast rate. He's also one of the biggest speedrunners on Twitch and has an entire chat of thousands of people feeding him information, which in my opinion is another massive advantage.
Okay, chat, I need help. 290. Oh, that's a good code.
Finally, the third person that stuck out to me was Spicy TV. Similar to Distortion, Spicy was the top Elden Ring speedrunner shortly after the game's release, which I think is a good game to look at when looking for speedrunners that can hop into a new game and quickly become one of the best at it when there are so many other people competing alongside them. But also Spicy is a dominant runner in Resident Evil Village and has almost a world record sweep over the entire leaderboard. Since Amok Runner plays similar to a horror game like Resident Evil, I think this gives him an edge in the competition. And this is what makes the competition so interesting to me as a spectator. Speedrunners like Ouija and Distortion don't speedrun the same games, so we never get to see them compete against each other. And that goes for a lot of speedrunning, where we never get to see these types of crossovers. But with a massive bounty on the line and a strict deadline, who will manage to come out on top? So anyways, what exactly is Amok Runner? Amok Runner is an action-adventure puzzle game for the PC. This game is loosely based off the 1922 novella by Stefan Zweig. The game is set in 1935, and we play as Till Meyer, a doctor who lives in a small town in some Indian islands where he's made a name for himself tending to its residents. We learn that he's been living here for 7 years, and while living in such a small town, has left him feeling isolated and depressed. That is until one day, a beautiful woman appears at his clinic. He immediately becomes infatuated with the woman, but shortly learns that the reason for her visit to this remote town and his clinic is because she is seeking a discreet abortion and is willing to offer £12,000 for the operation. But our protagonist isn't interested in money. He explains that apart from examining patients, he also has a private life outside of work, which maybe she came just in time for, and suggests that she meets with him outside of his office hours. The woman is immediately repulsed by the idea, as she clearly has a husband. I don't know why dude thought this would work. She then storms out of the office, warning the doctor to not follow her, or he'll be sorry for it. So naturally he follows her everywhere that she might be at, because this dude is a fucking lunatic. But while stalking this woman, you'll need to tread carefully, because a disease known as the Amok syndrome has been infecting the townspeople, causing severe vision loss, aggression, and fast movement speed and endurance. Will our protagonist be able to successfully stalk this woman into a relationship with him? And more importantly, which speedrunner will be able to do it in the shortest amount of time for the $10,000 bounty? Well, in today's video, hopefully I can show you what it takes to become a world-class Amok speedrunner, and also not repulse women, which is why today's video is sponsored by Manscaped. Listen, speedrunners have been looking through every corner of this doctor's clinic and home looking for skips. And while they may have found some, they definitely didn't find the Platinum Package 4.0, which comes with a weed whacker, ear and nose hair trimmer, shampoo, conditioner, body wash, and deodorant for the pits and downstairs too. Imagine you've been working day in and day out at your office job, and suddenly the love of your life walks in. But oh my god, just like the doctor in the story, you forgot to wear your Crop Reviver Ball Toner. No wonder why she stormed out of the building. But I haven't even scratched the surface of the Platinum Package 4.0, and you won't either with Manscaped's premier product, the Lawnmower 4.0, the electric and waterproof razor. You can get in on this amazing package and even get it for 20% off by going to manscaped.com/EZScape or using code EZScape at checkout. And if you do decide to go with the Platinum Package, they'll throw in a pair of Manscaped briefs and a travel bag to take on the go. Again, my code is EZScape. Make sure you check out the link to Manscaped in the description and pinned comment. Thanks again to Manscaped for sponsoring me. Now let's get back into the video. So again, the Amok Runner Speedrun Challenge was posted on December 27th, and it didn't take long for speedruns to start flooding in. One of the first times posted was a 34-minute time, and in only 2 days, that time would be dropped to a 20-minute time by Spicy TV. So I'll go over this run just to give you an idea of what type of obstacles speedrunners will have to tackle throughout this game before any skips were discovered. The game starts out in a ship off the Indian Ocean, where our protagonist sits on this bench with a stranger and has a restroom urinal-esque standoff with him, making the stranger want to leave. The doctor somehow convinces him to stay, and then trauma dumps this entire insane and depressing story on him. This accounts for the first minute and 15 seconds of the speedrun. Spicy then needs to make his way around the doctor's office, picking up and reading 3 different documents to learn about the doctor's backstory, and some information regarding the Amok syndrome. After reading the 3rd document, cues the woman, who I'll just be calling Linda, to enter the clinic. As she continues through her dialogue and makes her way through the office, Spicy will position himself close to the door to exit through it just as it closes, allowing him to position himself closer to the front door so he can leave immediately once it opens, saving a few seconds. Once Linda's dialogue about the books ends, Spicy can then skip the rest of her dialogue and wait for her to storm out of the clinic to chase her to the train station. Along the way, Spicy will grab this bike to speed up travel by a bit. While he does this, I think it's worth mentioning now that due to the game's checkpoint system, each and every trigger needs to be activated in order before progressing, which unfortunately for speedrunners means no massive sequence breaks are possible in this game. Also, the 2 timers you see on screen are for both real time and time without loads. Load removers are often used in PC games to ensure hardware doesn't give a performance advantage over others, especially in a competition like this with such a massive bounty up for grabs. This means strats involving reloading checkpoints to force more load screens can actually save quite a bit of time off the timer because they can cut out walking and skip certain cutscenes. Anyways, once Spicy gets to the train station, the train leaves just upon entering, preventing our protagonist from effectively stalking this woman. He searches around the station to learn that she's a famous noblewoman and the wife of a wealthy businessman. Spicy then heads to the doctor's house to grab the keys for the car and gets a new objective to go drive and break into the woman's house. The driving controls and physics are very unique to this game, as they feel very weird at first, especially the turning, which can be really touchy at times, especially if a lag spike occurs. This would only get more difficult for speedrunners to deal with, as pathing would get more optimized and corners would continue to get cut harder. Even cutting corners in this game is a lot harder than it sounds, as lots of objects have bigger hitboxes than they appear, but the even bigger issue is that other cars on the road tend to take up almost the entire path, and cars spawning in the way can make the difference in a few seconds to even losing entire runs. Upon reaching the entrance to the Nicholson's house, Spicy will crash the car into a log to stop the car quicker, and then be forced to solve a crane puzzle. The puzzle is the same every time, and it didn't really take long for speedrunners to find the fastest solution, which you can see Spicy doing in the background. He then drives through the containers until hitting the checkpoint for the Nicholson house, and then loads the checkpoint to instantly exit the car and spawn in front of the cellar, which you'll need to go through in order to get into the house. Before doing so, you'll head into the shed to get the bolt cutter. The cutter is locked away in a toolbox, so Spicy will need to solve the puzzle on the wall to open the toolbox. This puzzle is randomized, and speedrunners will need to convert the letters on the paper to numbers using the nearby cheat sheet. While at first glance this looks like it'd be somewhat difficult to solve quickly, there are only 5 possible combinations, and since there are such few combinations, speedrunners will only need to look at the first 2 letters to figure out the solution by either remembering all 5 combinations, or just looking over at the cheat sheet until they get used to it. Some community members even made a useful tool for speedrunners to practice the combinations out on, making it even easier to learn. But as we can see on Spicy's day 2 run here, he solves the puzzle in only 3 seconds, which would get dropped to only 1 second as speedrunners would get deeper into the competition. Once obtaining the bolt cutters, he'll then head into the cellar to cut the chain holding up the ladder, which triggers our first real encounter with people that have the Amok syndrome. The ladder drops down super slowly, so he has to wait around in here for a while, but avoiding the assailants isn't too difficult since they're supposed to be nearly blind. Spicy ends up just chilling by the ladder to climb up it as soon as possible, all while dodging axe swings left and right. After entering the house, he'll then head straight upstairs to solve this family tree puzzle with the paintings. This is another puzzle with no RNG, and speedrunners just have to remember the optimal order. Solving the puzzle will unlock the nearby room, where we can grab the key to the front door to leave the house and also grab a gun, which will come in handy right away, as after leaving the house will be another forced combat section. But this time all enemies need to be killed in order to continue. There's a damage multiplier depending on where in the body you shoot the enemies. Here's what the damage values for shooting each body part looks like. Enemies on easy have 90 health, so as long as you're getting body and headshots exclusively, it will always only take 3 shots to kill each enemy. For safety, it's probably worth going for at least 1 headshot when possible, in case of accidentally shooting an arm, but yeah, speedrunners will always want to kill each enemy in 3 shots because the gun only loads 6 bullets at a time, so missing 1 shot means an extra reload would be needed, losing a bit of time. Afterwards, you'll head back to the car, as it turns out the house we were just at has been abandoned for a very long time. Luckily, our protagonist conveniently remembers that the Nicholsons actually live in a mansion on the complete opposite side of the town, way over here, which probably would have been the better place to start at. After driving all the way to the mansion, Spicy will hop out of the car and enter the front gate, only to be attacked by 4 more people infected with the Amok syndrome. Just like before, you'll want to take them out with 12 shots to avoid needing to do any extra reloads or take any hits. But landing shots in this game can be pretty difficult sometimes, even for experienced runners. After killing the last enemy, you'll then head into this cabin to complete another puzzle to get the key to enter the mansion. For this puzzle, there are a bunch of planets that are all somewhat interconnected, and moving certain planets will move others along with them, and you'll need to get them all lined up in order to unlock the drawer for the key. This is another puzzle with no RNG involved, so runners can either just memorize a pattern or rely on a cheat sheet. After grabbing the key, Spicy will then head into the mansion through the side door. After entering, you'll need to do another puzzle. This is a Morse code puzzle, and you'll first need to go to the radio on the bottom floor to get the combination. For each number, there'll be a random combination of short and long beeps, with 5 beeps total for each number. There is a community-made practice tool to make learning this easier, but sometimes it can be a bit tricky, especially with nerves, because at this point, we're well over halfway through the game. Also, not only is there RNG with which combinations you get, but speedrunners can either save or lose time here, depending on if they get numbers that are quick to enter into the safe. After opening the safe, you'll get the key for the master bedroom and grab the rope inside. This isn't important to the speedrun, but there is a note in this room implying that Linda had an affair, which is why she wants the abortion. And I have to assume her husband is named John, but I'm not 100% sure since the family tree portion from earlier literally just has me on it. But if this is the case, then I feel like leaving a note in your husband's mansion with this information on it might not be the smartest move if you're trying to keep it a secret. But yeah, moving on. Now we need to find some way to escape out of the mansion, because apparently the Nicholsons built all of their homes to not unlock from the inside. Spicy then ties a rope to the statue up the staircase, attaches a rope to the front door, and then pushes the statue over to break it open and exits the building. Upon exiting, he notices Linda's servant standing by the front gate, and he seems distressed, asking the doctor to come with him urgently, and the doctor obliges. Spicy then needs to drive to the Chinatown area on the map. Along the way, we learn that after leaving the doctor's clinic, Linda went to a sketchy part of the town to get an operation from a witch doctor. although from what we hear, it doesn't sound like the operation went well at all. After arriving at Chinatown, the servant will lead the doctor to Linda. Spicy will continue along the path until reaching a gate blocked off by another puzzle, in which these fuses need to be charged in order to progress. There's no RNG with this puzzle, and the solution is to completely fill the third button from the left, then the first button, and then finally the second button. Upon reaching the clinic, 4 enemies will rush the doctor, and they'll all need to be taken out in order to enter the clinic. After entering the clinic, we'll find Linda, but things are looking pretty bleak, and there's blood all over the place. The doctor says he needs to get her to the hospital, but she exclaims that she'd rather die than have anyone find out what happened. She makes the doctor promise to not let anybody find out about the cause of her death. Since Linda is refusing to go to the hospital, we need to search a place for morphine. This will be the final puzzle of the game, and it's kind of weird that the last 2 puzzles are quite a bit easier than all of the earlier ones. For this one, there is luck involved, but all Spicy needs to do is run around the clinic, finding the lock combination written on the walls. The first one is by Linda, the next one is on the wall outside her room, and the final one is on the ceiling in the bathroom. After unlocking the safe and grabbing the morphine, we'll head back to Linda, but unfortunately, she perishes on the spot. We're then sent to the chief physician's office, where the doctor makes a deal with the physician to sign a document stating that Linda died of natural causes, in order to keep the true nature of her death a secret. In exchange, the doctor agrees to leave the town and never return, giving up his house, pension, and the entire life he's been building in the town for so many years just to make good on his promise. Spicy then heads back to the doctor's home to grab a ticket for the ferry. If we listen to the radio, we'll learn that the police have been tipped off that the doctor was involved in Linda's death. So when Spicy leaves the house and gets in his car, he begins being chased by the police. During the chase, Spicy does go off-roading a bit, maneuvering around some of the suggested barriers to save time, and eventually arrives at a cemetery. He then heads in with the police continuing to chase him inside. After heading through the intended path, he'll eventually hit a trigger, spawning in the town butcher, which has been suffering from the Amok syndrome, and he attacks and kills the police. Although in later runs, a new path will be discovered to be able to avoid this trigger. Just as he gets close to the exit, he'll hit a checkpoint where he'll be confronted by the butcher. Spicy will reload this checkpoint to skip a short cutscene, and then a battle will commence. This boss has 1000 HP, so it will take a lot of shots to take him out. Headshots can speed this fight up by quite a bit, but it makes it a lot more difficult to land every shot and to perform rapid fire shots due to the recoil. So Spicy opts for 6 body shots and then ducks under the knives while reloading. He also makes sure to keep a solid distance away from the butcher to ensure that he doesn't approach for close combat, while also slowly making his way towards the exit so he can instantly leave after finishing him off. As the doctor runs towards the ship, he'll begin having flashbacks, giving him massive headaches. Once Spicy arrives at the ship, he reloads the checkpoint and now has come full circle back to talking with the passenger from the start of the game. The passenger informs him that in the morning, he noticed them loading a coffin onto the ship, presumably Linda's, as the husband wants her body shipped back to Europe. Upon hearing this news, the doctor instantly begins searching the ship, looking for the coffin. Spicy will then grab a water valve to use it for later, which then triggers this weird vision, where the doctor sees an autopsy being performed on Linda. If the husband gets Linda all the way to Europe to perform the autopsy, he may learn about her true reason for death. So the doctor, in an obsessive effort, makes his way to the coffin. He pushes it into the ocean, keeping her secret safe with him, but then shockingly jumps into the ocean after her, taking her secret to his grave. And that's the end of the game. Spicy manages to finish this run with 29 minutes and 5 seconds on the timer. A pretty good time for the first 2 days, and it seemed like so much of the game had already been solved. But was this really going to be competitive enough for an intense speedrun competition? Like, why did Charlie pick this game of all games to hold a competition for? Well, for starters, he knew that barely anybody had ever played the game before, and knew for sure that nobody had ever tried speedrunning it, which means the competition would be an even playing field for anyone wanting to participate in it, and the game was pretty cheap at only $9. Also, Charlie was inspired to make the competition for this game because he believed it to have great speedrun potential, but he wasn't able to put the pieces together to make it happen himself. He did find a skip that took him from the beginning area of the ship to the end near the coffin, by clipping into a staircase and then walking along the railing and then dropping down to the coffin. But like I mentioned earlier, due to this game's strict checkpoint system, pushing the coffin into the water just wasn't possible. However, this skip discovery did have some potential to save a bit of time towards the end of the run. You would still need to pick up the water wheel and go through the operation room flashback, but then after this, you could go back on the deck, skip to where the coffin is, go down the stairs and hit the final trigger just before the coffin, and then push it into the ocean. Since you would still have to go out of your way quite a bit to pull this off, And the only thing you really skip is attaching the water wheel and turning off the gas. It only saved a few seconds. And considering how difficult it was to perform consistently, nobody was using it in runs unless they wanted to YOLO at the very end for some cheeky time save. But even though the game's checkpoint system prevented any type of sequence breaks, Charlie was onto something when he said the game had some sick speedrun potential, and it didn't take long for speedrunners to begin finding stuff.
I'm too slow. Oh! Oh! Shit! Oh, that's probably too far. God.
Yeah, so it turns out collision in this game is really buggy, which it did seem like Charlie was aware about, but I'm not sure if he was aware of just how ridiculous it could get. By placing your character between moving vehicles or NPCs to squeeze the character between other solid objects would create launches that would allow for massive amounts of height and speed. So while speedrunners wouldn't be able to get around the checkpoint system, maybe they could abuse these launches to propel themselves from checkpoint to checkpoint instead. One of the first setups speedrunners came up with was the fisherman launch. By using textures on the ground, using a precise location on the compass, backing the bike up to the wall, and hopping off the bike just as the fisherman walks up to the wall would allow for a decently sized launch in the direction of the train station. Once launched in the air, you can then move the character around to go straight into the station. This seemed like the most obvious launch to implement into runs because it could be performed within the first few minutes, which meant resets wouldn't be too punishing if it couldn't be pulled off. One of the first runners we would see having success with this trick would be Zach777, who early on became a front runner in the competition, maintaining world record for days on end with little to no response from everyone else. By the 6th day of the competition, we would see Zach drop the time down to a 28:18. Before the fisherman launch, speedrunners were entering the train station in the mid 3:30s, but with it, they were able to save nearly 20 seconds as we see Zach propel himself inside with a 3:13. Most of the rest of his time save came from cleaner driving with more concise pathing, choosing better spots to load checkpoints, and slightly cleaner execution with the puzzles. However, the problem with launches were that the higher frame rate you played the game on, the more consistent and powerful launches were. So to prevent runners from having a hardware advantage, a 60 FPS cap was created to even the playing field. This in turn made launches more difficult, and the fisherman launch no longer felt as consistent as it did before. This is actually why runners open the map just before performing the launch, because it slows down time, therefore increasing FPS, making the launches stronger. Luckily, the fisherman launch would end up getting replaced with a new strat called the cock launch. Even at 60 FPS, setting up with this NPC by the chickens would be extremely consistent. Not only that, but this trick was also 10 to 15 seconds faster than the fisherman launch, allowing runners to get to the train station in 3 minutes flat. With this trick plus some additional minor time saves and optimizations would improve the world record time down to a 27:47 by Zach. The logical conclusion at this point would be if speedrunners wanted to continue dropping the time down from here, they'd have to add in even more launches. Like I mentioned earlier, there are 4 traveling sections of the game that would greatly benefit from performing launches. These would be going from the clinic to the train station, which we already have the cock launch for, and the others would be going from the doctor's house to the Nicholson house, and then going from the Nicholson house to the mansion, and finally the mansion to Chinatown. Since the doctor's house to the Nicholson house was a bit earlier in the run, this would be the next place to look. If you recall from earlier, normally to get into the Nicholson house, you have to complete the crane puzzle, but the checkpoint telling you to enter the house isn't actually triggered by completing the puzzle, but instead occurs when walking near the gate. So there was potential here that the crane puzzle could be skipped entirely. The problem is there is a giant invisible wall surrounding the house with seemingly no weak points for entry. But the walls don't extend infinitely upwards, so with enough height, it could be possible to get over them. Distortion began working on a setup near the doctor's house to launch himself from there to inside the invisible barrier past the crane puzzle. And while Distortion did manage to find a launch that accomplished this, there were some problems. The first is that obviously there was no chance that this launch was going to be consistent, but the other issue is that by launching the car over the barrier like this, avoids hitting the trigger, preventing any progression from taking place. So Distortion would instead look for a new launch setup closer to the house to clear the barrier, and also activate the trigger, and here's what he found.
Okay. Gonna work? Larksa, get ready. You're about to witness history. Yeah, baby!
Is that the skip?
Let's go!
Oh my god. This is the most uninteresting game you've ever speedrun.
Come on,
In my
Larksa!
entire
We
life.
just did crane skip!
By driving the car into a cone, the cone loses its collision, which is then reset after 10 seconds. Once its collision is reset, speedrunners can then open up the map and use the collision to launch them over the barrier and hit the checkpoint. This was a massive discovery indeed, an entire puzzle removed out of the run, saving a whole minute. But again, there's just one problem. How are we going to leave the house if we're still trapped inside of this barrier, and the crane puzzle was never completed? Well, we're going to need another launch to get back outside, but why waste a perfectly good launch just escaping the house? Might as well knock out 2 birds with 1 car, and find a setup to launch straight to the mansion while we're here, so that's exactly what speedrunners did. Since there were limited objects to use in this area, the car would need to be used to launch the doctor across the map, but ditching the car after that was fine, since we get it back after leaving the mansion. The idea was to find an object to prop the car on its side, exit the vehicle once in a good position to clip the doctor inside the car, and then open up the map and hope everything lined up to shoot towards the mansion. At first a log was used for the setup, but everyone eventually decided that this plank would give the most consistent results. The keywords here being most consistent, because this trick was anything but consistent. Because even just pulling off these tricks wouldn't be good enough for top level runs. You need to have good speed and not too much height to avoid losing significant time. All runs beyond this point would need to use all 3 of these launches for a world record, no exceptions. Several runners by this point were putting in 12+ hour sessions, trying to get perfect lineups to get quick launches for world record, and while there is a bare minimum skill requirement to pull off these launches in the first place, they just weren't consistent, and speedrunning this game at this point was like participating in the lottery. In these long sessions, it would be rare to see speedrunners get past the mansion launch more than 2 to 3 times, which was just demoralizing. And you could quickly sense tensions rising, with some of the highest highs and the lowest lows you can have in speedrunning.
The glitches in this game are the most cursed shit out of any game I've ever fucking played. It's just so unbelievable. I just don't understand how how the skips can be so fucking inconsistent.
What are you saying impatient for? It's literally random. I could fucking sit here and set up for 20 minutes and it's not gonna change anything. That's the second time he said that when the plank skip failed.
Dude, Kitty, what the fuck? Dude, you should have seen what she just fucking did. When you did. Somebody clipped that. She just like tried to fucking sabotage me.
Oh, grab the key! What the fuck, man?
Any run that made it past mansion launch instantly became super hype, and also super stressful, as the last thing runners wanted to do was throw away all of their hard work getting to this point in the first place. There were some additional strats that were found that can make up for lost time as potential backups, like a method for launching to Chinatown, but nobody would ever go for this on world record pace, as this launch was no more consistent than the rest. By the final days, there were also some low FPS strats being developed, where you drop the game down to something like 4 FPS, and you could run into the cars while heading into the ferry to speed boost and skip the headache animations that normally play here. But this required some good car RNG, and didn't always give consistent launches. There was also this funny mansion launch setup, where you would set the game to 4 FPS upon entry, to get to the door to the mansion before the building loads in, skipping the planet puzzle. But this just didn't seem worth, as you'd still have to take out all of the enemies while playing on 4 FPS, losing back most of the time saved. It also seemed like at this point, nobody was interested in moist skip, because the risk to reward ratio just wasn't worth it. By January 7th, we'd see the first well-optimized run using both the cone launch and mansion launch by Zach, where he clutched out an unbelievable time of 25 minutes and 33 seconds. This time would stand uncontested for several days, and by January 11th, the final day of the competition, Zach decided to throw in the towel, as he pretty much had enough of running this game, and was willing to risk having someone beat his record. But with only 1 day left to go, would anyone be able to clutch it out within the time limit?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know what to say.
And just like that, Ouija managed to absolutely clutch the world record, beating Zach's time by only 1 second, only 2 hours before the end of the competition. Some other notable PBs from this day would be Distortion achieving a 25:38 at 4th place, Bob Toad who PB'd by over a minute, which ended up landing him a 3rd place time, 1 second ahead of Distortion with a 25:37. And then of course, Zach in 2nd with his 25:33, and finally Ouija with a 25:32. While this competition was initially supposed to be $10,000 to whoever had the world record, the top runners made an agreement to split the prize pool, $6,000 to 1st, $2,500 to 2nd, and $1,500 to 3rd, which I think is a great way to go about it, so that all the people who put in the most amount of time and got the best leaderboard placements all get to earn something from this. Because top runners like Ouija literally put in over 190 hours in the span of 2 weeks, which is a crazy amount of dedication, but ultimately did pay off for him. Huge thanks to Charlie for putting on this challenge. From a spectator standpoint, it was really enjoyable to watch. Charlie also plans on creating one of these competitions every month and plans to keep the same prize pool split for the top runners, but also an additional $1,000 bounty for whoever finds the most impactful glitch using the run. I wasn't super interested in this competition because I didn't feel like I'd be able to compete well enough for a 1st place time, but with the top 3 prize pool in mind, I'm definitely interested in giving it a shot next time around, and I hope some of you watching will as well. Anyways guys, I really hope you enjoyed this video. This video is made more to focus on highlighting the game's story, gameplay, and speedrun strat progression. But I know Charlie plans to make his own world record progression within a few weeks of this upload, and I'd highly recommend keeping your eye out for it when it comes out, because I expect it to be really enjoyable to watch and will give a much better spotlight on all of the runners involved. Also, special thanks again to Manscaped for sponsoring this video. Again, if you guys want to get 20% off their entire site, just go to manscaped.com/EZScape or use code EZScape at checkout, with either the link in the description or the pinned comment. That's all I have to say for today's video. Leave a like if you enjoyed, subscribe for more speedrunning related content, and as always, I hope you all have a beautiful life.